It sounds like you might be the entire leader of this country or industry to go ahead and do this and really help bridge that gap. I
Let's
think,
hope so.
yeah. Hello, this is Michael Kelleher, and the mobile patio is open. I am here with Courtney Thompson, who has a long history of being in the industry, but in a really cool moment, she is going out on her own in the advisory role, and we'll speak about that in a second, with a new company that you'll be hearing a lot about, and I already have on LinkedIn, called Consigliera. Hi, Courtney. How you doing today?
Good morning. Happy Friday.
Yes, happy Friday. So you are out on your own, but for a long time. You've spent your Memorial Day weekends working for a large company, Flagstar Bank.
Yep.
Can you just tell us a little bit about your role and what you did at Flagstar most recently?
Sure thing. So after a lovely career in the space as a litigator, and after rocking a large compliance project in a consulting review after Dodd-Frank, Flagstar actually hired me to help them reframe and relook at, how we do default mortgage servicing. So for the last 7 years, I have had the honor and pleasure of working with literally the best team in mortgage servicing, running the default side of their shop. And of course, most recently, we just all took our, ocean ready surfboards and rode the COVID-19 mortgage wave. And so once the team was settled in and good to go, I, found it time to make my exit.
Yeah. So we were just on virtual Capitol Hill. I was talking with Senator Elizabeth Warren and Senator Markey and the others. And one of the pieces that we ended with was to tell what a great job, at least the forbearance has been on the CARES Act. One local bank had about 10% of their portfolio. So 14,000 loans they serviced. About 1,400 people went into that forbearance, and only 140 people were left. And I thought that was so cool, like 1%. And I think the other bank was the same thing, much smaller numbers, but it was almost like a 10% down to 1%. So it definitely was a time of uncertainty. Like, will this work?
Yes.
Can it fly? But it sounds like it's working. How much legal, because I know you have that law background from Michigan State, how much legal advice needs to go into making sure that, because there was no guidance and you had to do it quick, what is it like working in a quick environment for a big institution?
Well, so I had the benefit of literally being with my team for about 6 years before COVID hit. And so we had a very good thing going. So when stuff hit the fan, we were able to adjust quickly. We ran a pretty innovative shop for servicing and for default. So we had a lot of web-based and other tools, to get ahead of the consumer. But I think one of the biggest lessons learned from last March and April is how much the consumer, and not just the typical default consumer, how much the consumer, generally speaking, doesn't understand about their mortgage, how it operates, and what might be available to them. It was a wild period of time. It was a rough period of time. And we are seeing a bounce back of forbearances, generally speaking, in the industry, meaning these consumers that opted into this CARES Act protection, are getting back on their feet. But there is a meaningful number of consumers, particularly Ginnie Mae consumers, that remain on the programs. I think private institutions are seeing, a lot better bounce back from the forbearance population. And, the default world is really ramping up, from a total legal perspective, right? Legal regulatory perspective for what is next. We have some pending rules with the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau that the comment period just ended for, that we're anticipating in July or August. There's going to be a lot of work that needs to happen in a very short period of time to be ready there. And then, the big question is, when will the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau lift the foreclosure moratoriums? In their proposed rule, they basically said, let it be known that it might be December 31st. And if that's the case, servicers, foreclosure firms, the industry is really going to have to prepare for foreclosure in a way that it's never done before. And that will happen this year too.
Yeah. We had a wake up call yesterday with Director Calabria mentioning out of nowhere that GSE reform and exiting conservatorship is going to happen on his watch. And that's something we've actually been, and I was just saying it, not to keep plugging the MMBA, but I was just saying it to the Congress, the representatives, but we didn't know that this letter was out there, that this was going to happen. We had all of these things to say. And then in the board meeting yesterday, it's like, boom, this thing pops up and it's going to happen. And we're like, we didn't want it to happen that fast. So I can see, there's a difference between knowing it's happening and then out of nowhere. It's almost like COVID. They just out of nowhere were like, okay, as of May 29th in Massachusetts, which has been one of the strictest states, we're going to allow everything now, masks off and on. And so we're even looking at the conferences being like, oh, we can do this differently.
Yeah.
I'm guessing it's kind of the same thing. Like you can prepare for it, but when if they don't give a long enough forecasted guidance, you're going to need more technology probably to communicate with these borrowers, right?
Well, for sure. Also, I think it was a good thing, and, thumbs up to the Bureau on this one, truly, by issuing a proposed rule. It's kind of like a really solid last call, meaning they've told us where, they think that they need to be. So if servicers aren't preparing for the final rule to look something like the proposed rule right now, you're cutting off your nose to spite your face. I think that's the word.
Yep.
So we can position ourselves from readiness. The details will come from the final rule, but by having it come out in April and, giving us a couple months heads up, the servicing industry should be positioning themselves, to comply with, the three major components of that rule, which is how we communicate with borrowers, how we underwrite loss mitigation instruments, and what we're going to do to ensure consumers don't go to foreclosure unless they are the right candidate for foreclosure.
Those three are very distinct and seem to be very consumer first, right?
Always.
Yes. Where do you go to get your knowledge? Are you finding these days on rule changes and in different areas?
Sure. The CFPB actually does a wonderful job of keeping the industry informed about where they are and what they are. There's standard RSS feeds with, each of the institutions, whether it be Ginnie Mae, Fannie Mae, FHFA, CFPB. And I think that, it's a lot to keep up with. Generally speaking, I always have said that, in addition to that, with foreclosure land, you have 50 states that are governing foreclosure. So you kind of have to keep your finger on the pulse of that. But, All Regs also is probably the best resource for consolidated new things in the rule space as well.
Can the average consumer look at All Regs, or is it industry specific you have to subscribe to?
I think it's better if you subscribe to it, but all regs and all of these rules are available to the consumer. By way of example, if you have a Fannie Mae loan, you can subscribe to Fannie Mae updates and get those on the regular.
Interesting. So you went to college in Western Michigan, then you went to Michigan State Law.
Mm-hmm.
In law, do they teach like anything about mortgages? Are you aware of mortgages more because Home Point is there and Flagstar and United Wholesale Mortgage and Rocket Mortgage? Like, do people come out of college different there and say, I want to work in the mortgage industry, or is it similar as here where everybody wants to be have their own startup or?
Oh, geez. Oh, like a regional
Marketing.
flair for, I would say in Michigan, it's probably like the auto industry or engineering is probably more so. No, for me, I've always been obsessed with, I wanted to be Perry Mason, and I lived out my dream of being Perry Mason. And it wasn't for me ultimately. And as a part of that, it was always in real estate. And I've always been kind of obsessed with residential real estate. And how humans meet it. When I had the opportunity to, manage a consultancy through the independent foreclosure review post Dodd-Frank, when all of our work shifted from Truth in Lending Act issues, right, to foreclosure avoidance and, other regulatory related issues, that's kind of when I really had a John the Baptist moment in mortgage, and was thrown in and pulled out, in the name of, what I've become over the last decade. But, I live in the Metro Detroit area. I was born of, I would say, the best real property law firm in the Metro Detroit area. It was born that way back in the 1920s. It's Madden Hauser, Wartell, Roth, and Heller. They think they're going by just Madden Hauser now. And it's there where I learned everything that there is to know about real estate transactions and how they work, really setting the framework for, where I am today.
Okay. So you're getting back into the consultant space, and you're not just taking your passion for what you did at Flagstar, but you have, as far as operations goes and execution goes, you have a lot of experience from that consultancy firm.
I have a really good Botox program, but I'm pushing up on 20 years of, being in the real estate space in different roles. And so I think that the most valuable thing that I was able to bring to Flagstar, and then Flagstar, I've always said, running default servicing operations at Flagstar is the best gift I never asked for. I was a lawyer. I was in an advisory role. And literally on April Fool's Day, Lee Smith from Flagstar called me into his office and said, he has a British accent. It's just as cool as a Boston accent, but I'm not going to do it because I'm terrible at accents. He said, we're thinking about moving you over to the business line. And I was like, why would you ever do that? But, it was putting on a different version, a different hat. And one of the reasons why I'm the most excited about Consigliera outside of, all of the fintech stuff that we're doing, is the fact that I think that, I'm one of the only people in the industry that have had the opportunity to be a litigator in the space, to be outside compliance counsel in the space, to be outside regulatory counsel in the space, inside compliance, advisory, and then actually run the business in the same area. I call it luck with a little bit of hard work. And so it is that diverse experience in both operations and advisory that Consigliera is formed in to really help the industry during this difficult time. Yeah.
And sometimes I can't help but look at the signs behind you as you speak. It's like, start with yes. When you get offered a great opportunity, sometimes you just say yes and ask questions later.
Figure it out later. Yeah.
Now, so let's get into, I think, what's passionate for myself and maybe the viewers of Mobile Patio. And I guess we'll speed up to where I'd like to go. But I have so many questions, it's hard to get there. But it's okay. So like starting a technology company, and here's what I said to Mark Helm, who was on the show earlier. He's been through multiple cycles. So there's a lot of technology innovators like myself out there making front end solutions. And we'll get into the fulfillment and the delivery and the default in a second. But I know you consult there too. So it's all relevant, and everybody's going to the life cycle of a loan or customer for life, right?
Sure.
All that said, the mortgage industry has its like little idiosyncrasies, or it has its safety nets where decision makers fall back on. And I think you might see it less in institutions that are playing the long game.
Sure.
So there, you might run into a longer adoption time or a longer time where they roll out with you, or the independents that when it goes through a cycle and they have to look at margin compression, some technologies, even though they're working, go. And I think some of the new technology, and I might be wrong, but there could be a small chance that great tech ends up meeting margin compression and says, and I hear it like on, when you hear just innovators in the room in Clubhouse, like,
sure,
why wouldn't they think this way? There's some parts of the mortgage industry, they just don't, because they're trained by so much regulation.
Right.
They've kind of been wired now to take 3 steps backwards, 1 step forward,
100%.
4 steps forward, 3 back. But okay. So with all that said, I think that's going to play a lot into your advisory moving forward, where it's like, don't just keep innovating in the sense of making screens, make sure you're innovating around solving pain.
Yes.
what are some pain points you see on the origination side, is what I'm getting at,
Yeah.
that if they understood more of the servicing side, maybe they would be able to deliver a more holistic approach?
Sure. So a couple of places. So I had the honor and pleasure of leading Flagstar's FinTech Accelerator program, which was really my, deep dive into, how do we match technology with problems? And I love the way that you put that. There has to be a problem. It can't be tech for tech's sake. There has to be a problem. Otherwise, no one's going to bite, because the truth of the matter asserted is that in the financial services industry, there's very little incentive to innovate, period. Right. And so, some of the problems, or I think a lot of the problems are where things get gross and dirty, honestly, and that's in default for sure. But on the origination side, I think it's in fulfillment. There's a lot of people coming out with targeted solutions, this, that, and the other. But I don't think anybody's really solved the fulfillment paradigm. I think that, adoption in the digital mortgage space is a problem. Right.
Yeah.
And we're not taking enough baby steps in that process. Right. To really solve some of the problems. By way of example, banks and lending institutions hate doing large scale implementations. Large scale implementations take a lot of time, take a lot of energy away from your operators, and you have to get them right. Otherwise, they can be catastrophic. Why can't we start, by way of example, with digital signatures on paper documents, now that there's 32, 33 states that I think North Carolina just threw their hat in the ring, that are saying yes to Ron? Why can't we start with digital signatures on paper documents to make closings more efficient, and then solve, other problems within this paradigm? And I think that, the best solutions right now address problems like you're saying, but also, right, are easy to implement. They're not these cataclysmic like mainframe systems that you have to replace everything within it. It's a slick API that gives you, this much return for choosing that piece on the menu. And, fulfillment in loss mitigation is not that different than fulfillment in the origination space. And, our partnership with Stabby at Flagstar to implement Ron for loss mitigation was a big win, right? That can bring a benefit to the consumer. The implementation was weeks, right? Not months, not a year. And, the origination space could do that too, particularly the shop that's not as innovative, that just wants to, get a win in terms of efficiency.
Yeah, I feel like there's so many different pieces on origination already built that if they were applied to the servicing side, like in a micro beta test, right? Like you could explore and then come up with your finalized solution. And I think that's why consultancies like yourself, and it sounds like you might be the entire leader of this country or industry to go ahead and do this and really help bridge that gap.
Let's hope so.
Yeah. I think we're a lot about bridging gaps. Obviously, I mentioned the gap between origination technology and servicing technology, sure, and margin. Where on that digital signature, right?
Right.
On the paper, I know it solves pain points for the consumer.
Right.
What pain points for a lender like are you looking at to solve with that? And is that something that Stabby does, or is that something Stabby plus other innovators will have to complete?
Well, it is something that Stabby does, but it's the whole nature of, and, forgive the dramatics, but this is true, right? And so Stabby came to us at Flagstar as an origination solution. So it's there. I mean, it's built. It is what they do. And so what we did when we invited them into the program, or what I did when I invited them into the program, I was like, can we take this solution and look at it this way? And then we get all this juicy tech that's built for origination land, and we can bring it over to the servicing side of the house. The answer to the question is you don't need people to stand at scanners and hit a button all day long to make sure that you have your documents, stored in the same way. And whether it's loss mitigation or foreclosure, the foreclosure use case for digital signatures on paper PDF documents, right, is huge, right? The servicing industry spends hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and thousands of dollars on FedEx, on printers, on ink, on paper, on the human that stands in front of the thing and goes like this every day, and then has to move the shit from their, desktop to here to there, whatever the case may be. And it's just massively inefficient because the current technology providers in the servicing industry have zero incentive to innovate because they're the only ones there. And so the technology tends to be, I use the word stone aged.
Yeah.
And so it is actually the physical movement of paper that is the efficiency, because you're no longer physically moving pieces of paper.
Hey, Mike, what are you doing here at the Historic Salem Witch Museum in Salem, Massachusetts?
Paul, I'm checking out the local sites.
Pretty cool, isn't it? Did you know the Salem witch trials lasted from February of 1692 through May of 1693 and over 25 people died as a result?
Wow, I didn't know that. Seems kind of harsh.
It was.
Guess that was the 1600s. Nowadays, did you know the average person is on their phone for 4 hours and 35 minutes a day?
Sounds about right. I'm on my phone all the time, Mike.
Me too. Ask my chiropractor.
What are you doing?
I have a pre-qual request from my realtor.
And you doing it on your phone?
It's already done.
That's amazing. Super responsive.
And easy.
Who knew?
I use easy mortgage apps.
Makes sense.
It does.
Yeah, there was a study or a challenge to kids across America, like how could you save the government money? And the winner ended up being, in some famous story, he changed the font size and it saved the government like billions of dollars because they were they could print on less, and there was just some simple out of the box thought. But we're saying the same thing. So obviously it'd be easier for the customer to not scan and go down to Staples. But even if they can't change, it's like complaining about a Pepsi on a Southwest flight. It's not like you can really do anything about it, right? Like next time I'm gonna fly a different airline. They're like, okay. But they can't change like services on the fly because of that bad service. But you can prove all the margin on paper, all the margin on everything you just said in delivery.
Right.
But also, I always say that, like, the world's not in a vacuum, and maybe it's just me pushing mobile and nobody listening for years, but mobile is the king of it's not in a vacuum. You could be paying your mortgage if you're using a Mr. Cooper, right? From pushing your daughter on the swing set. Whereas if you use one of the other providers, you have to go back and sit in front of a computer. That could be the difference between a 30-day late and going on a bad track. I think it's the same thing. I'm sure it's just hard to get the data to prove it, but I'm sure there are people that wanted to get out of forbearance and maybe didn't because of the logistics of getting down to Staples and getting that signature, and then it passed. And now they're in this lost world again which, by the way, if you call a servicer, they're so busy right now. It's like calling a bank during the PPP days. You can't get a hold of anybody to assist you. So there's no tech because they didn't need to do it. There's no solution for my documents. And now I can't get a hold of anybody. And I'm back on that island that the CFPB doesn't want me on, right? And that's, you're going to solve for all that, but you're going to need a lot of help from different technology and lenders, right?
Two things. One, at Flagstar Bank, since last April, you could call us and get us in less than a minute on the phone. And so I'll say that because I don't think Flagstar was an outlier there. I think that there are some companies that are having a hard time talking to consumers. But after that wave, we were available. And I'm just giving a shout out to my servicing folks who are working their faces off that there are institutions that still haven't managed to get it right. But the ones that are consumer first organizations, which Flagstar is, we got it right because we had to. And we scaled fast because we had to, and we put tech out there because we had to. And that's the way that we viewed it. And I think that's just depends on the soul of the organization that you're talking about. Secondarily, though, from a notarization perspective and the consumer's perspective, I would invite you to think about not places where you even have access to Staples. Podunk town in, state ABCD, right? I don't want to rip on any states here. No. I don't want to call out Iowa or Oklahoma or anything crazy like that.
Yeah.
If you live in a small town where the only notary in your town that's available to you is at the local bank, And, you know, the 250 people in town may not know until you go to the local bank that you weren't able to pay your mortgage for the last year. And you've got to go to the bank and make an appointment and have these documents that say you didn't pay your mortgage for the last year. You have to take a day off of work, right, to go in to make sure that you can do that. And there's a lot of people that need help that technology can help with these RON solutions. And there's, you know, a few of them. There's only one right now, retrofit for servicing. That consumer can close from the privacy of, you know, you name it, whether it's their office, their home, their whatever the case may be, without having to make that additional effort to get back on their feet.
Yeah, that's so true. I remember I visited a client in Tulsa, Oklahoma, landed in Dallas, drove up, and that's a long drive of
Right.
we didn't see many staples. In fact, funny story was in Dallas, it's very hot. So I would never check the heater. It gets cold there. I found out I had a rental car with less than 100 miles on it and the heater didn't work. So I had to drive 4 hours and stop at like every gas station to warm up.
That's terrible.
But the things we have to do to visit the lenders to make sure everything's going well.
Road life.
Yes, road life. So where do you, and it's coming back. So, I mean, there's so much to unpack here because I think it's so, I mean, it seems to be like that's where it's going to go. Servicing is now going to go through the wave that retail went. And I think what I didn't see when I started my mobile app company in 2013 was how evolved and how popular point of sales would become.
Oh my God.
And now there's a lot of them, right? And I could mention them all for a free 50 retweets, but I won't. So do you think there'll be something like, is it just going to be making payments on a, like, okay, I'm mobile and I'm biased. So like why every company doesn't have the Mr. Cooper making your payment, but that's not point of sale. Like to me, that's obvious. So I don't think that's going to be the answer. What's the non-obvious answer that everybody, you think there's going to be like 20 vendors that do the same thing in 5 years? And I don't mean to put you on the spot, but I
think that we have to think about bridging all of this beautiful stuff that was built for origination to the servicing space. Consumer assistance in the servicing space is not only a priority of the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, right, and their innovation office, it's the right thing to do. We haven't had the need in servicing, which is a very low margin business, right, to fix that. But if you think about the return, so I go back to what are the costs of servicing and how can I directly show the financial benefit to innovation? Because if you can't do that in servicing, you will not win because there's no other incentive to do it because humans don't get to choose their servicer. And because humans don't get to choose their servicer, it does, there's not a lot of incentive to innovate in the space. But I go back to paper. Any of these places where there's paper in the process where we're to if there is a mobile digital solution, right, to that problem that the consumer, and you can also, by the way, Michael, meet the consumer where they are. How often do you read your mail? How often do you sit down and open every piece of mail that you get each day?
I do it very fragmented. So maybe every 4 days I'll try and catch up on them.
You put it all in the green bucket and you look at it, at the end of the day. I mean, I think that that's where we can show servicers that there's a huge financial yield to innovating as well. So I think that it is, I don't necessarily think a lot of new tech needs to be born. I think that the tech that's here needs to diversify, the way that they look at things and partner with, people that understand the industry, that want to help the industry move forward to help the consumer. And, think of new ways to take that tech, just like Stabby did, and go, whoop, right?
Yeah.
And create new use cases. I will say, origination folks, you'd picked a better idea, right? To be in origination. There's a lot more money in origination. But, servicing, it's much more challenging because you're talking about being able to do the same thing for hundreds of thousands of people at one time, right? Instead of a beginning, middle, and end transaction. But there's so much room in servicing for new tech.
And I think us innovators need help from consultants like yourself, really, for the economics and the business plan. Like every time I try and go to build an app for servicing,
Right.
which we have with the service provider FICS, right? And I think I have something that every company that uses FICS should be offering to their clients. But the economics, I don't know where to start. I don't know what to do about pricing. And I think that's where you call Courtney, and don't waste any time over analyzing it. Just so you sound good to potential investors, you sound intelligent to servicers. Don't come with an origination mindset of pricing. And it sounds like Courtney can help you. Like, okay, you want to make somebody's life easier. Well, you got to give to get, meaning you're going to have to fix this paper problem too. And I'll help you find one in here. I think that's a really good model. Am I just...
Oh, no, I mean, 100%, that's one of the places that we're looking really to continue to partner with the fintech industry. Brian Brooks had this like really beautiful interview on LinkedIn. If you're a nerd like me, I think things like this are beautiful.
Do you want to just give it a quick 10 seconds on his background? He's just a real his credentials speak for themselves, but he was the comptroller for the OCC, and he went out and he was on his own for a short bit, but now he's going to ride the wave of the Bitcoin revolution, cryptocurrency revolution. And so I'll find the link. I'll send it to you, Michael. But he had this interview about, where are the problems in tech? And he said that tech really needs people that have been in operations, people that have been in the trenches, to partner with the bright, innovative minds that are building consumer-friendly and beautiful technology. And honestly, I read that and I was like, I'm starting this company. This is what I'm going to do, because I have almost 20 years of experience in the trenches, thanks to Flagstar, thanks to Madden Hauser, thanks to all of these people that were willing to take a chance on me along the way. And now it is, how can I help these companies bridge the gap to financial institutions? How can we think about this thing that you've already invested millions and millions of dollars into building, and come up with 7 more use cases, in the servicing industry where the tech is Stone Agent? Yeah. I'd call it like the fields of dreams. So I think everything runs off fields that I've come across, or at least that is what connects it a lot of times. And so if operations could just take the time and help you draw that spider web or connect those fields back to your, then you would be able to solve a lot more problems. And for those listeners, a field could be the date of which somebody falls 31 days behind. That now can trigger whatever that you're offering. And then if Courtney's able to help bridge the gap of helping you find those fields, you're not flying blind, which is so important. So as we come up here at the end, I guess I have 2 or 3 questions, and then we'll wrap it up. I love the work hard and be nice to people. And I think in your servicing, like, that's where you should be the most nice to people, right? Like that you just need them to pay. And if they don't pay, find out why and how they like their home or what have you. You think, I don't know much about how much time is spent on the phone at these servicing institutions with their borrowers, and the percentage of people that pay on time, if they even ever talk to, versus the people that fall behind. Do you think tech allows you to be more nice to the customers, or do you think tech frees up time and that people shouldn't cut their workforce? Those people should start making calls and be nice to their customers.
Sure. So one of my personal missions on the planet that has bridged to professional land is meet people where they are. Don't meet people where you are, because you'll fail. Right. And so
meet people where they are.
Meet people where they are.
Don't meet them where you are, or you will fail.
Or you will fail. And a piece of that in servicing is thinking about whether or not, Michael, if you get a random phone call from a number you don't understand who it is, do you answer it?
No.
Michael, I mean, think about, I'll put it on myself. Humans who are unable to make their mortgage payment are in a tough spot. Most people will let their SiriusXM bill go, their water bill go, their cable bill. There's a lot of bills that go before the bill that is tied to your home asset, right? Mm-hmm. They are in a shame spiral. And there's probably 7 other collectors that are calling their phone right now. They're not answering their phone. So
all 888 numbers too. So it's like,
so how do we meet them where they are?
Yeah.
And the answer has to be here. This is where people are these days, right?
Absolutely.
And because of that, it is how can we break the shame cycle of servicing by creating an environment where somebody can be educated and understand what is happening with their loan, what their options are, and let them opt into, that cycle. I partnered with Brace AI as one of our final projects at Flagstar for their total loss mitigation application experience, which included a full forbearance workflow. If you opted into a CARES Act forbearance and didn't want to talk to somebody to get out of it because you just couldn't, you can do it all online now with Flagstar because of the technology that they built. And, it is important work. People who work in default mortgage servicing are not kicking people out of their homes. It's actually the last thing they want to do. And so,
but they do want to speak to you, right? It's like anybody that owes you money.
You want to be connected.
Yeah.
And I don't know what the word connected. I don't think that the word connected means talking to a human on the phone anymore. I think the majority of us don't talk on the phone anymore. I do. I write handwritten.
I always say 93% of millennial communication is nonverbal.
Yeah.
And of that 7% slice, only 1% is incoming phone calls, meaning, and here's another fact, a millennial is as scared to check their voicemail now as or a voicemail is as scary to them as the doorbell ringing, which is banana land, as we say in Boston, because
I love that.
They transcribe your voicemails for you. In 2013, when I started this company, I know for a fact, there's no transcribing of voicemails. You actually had to listen to them. And then, some of us are, old enough that you couldn't skip them. So you had to listen to all of your voicemails, awkward or not, to get to the most recent one. But so I think if they're afraid of voicemails now, they have no idea, what it was like in our day.
Well, ever since I had been able to message 143 to somebody's beeper about what my feeling set was, that was kind of the beginning of where we are now. And forget servicing. If consumer facing companies, collections companies of any sort, right? Regulatory, anything, are not thinking about meeting the consumer where they are, I think we're losing. And so creating behaviors and forums where the consumer is used to going, we have to do that before they go delinquent. Once they go delinquent, we have a problem, right? So let's teach the consumer in servicing to rely upon us and know that we're good mechanisms for communicating when things are good. It's like a good prenuptial agreement, right? You negotiate the divorce first. And I think that,
the lawyer in you there.
Yeah, well, trust in the industry, right, will increase dramatically if the consumers are met where they are.
If somebody wants to really get their arms around that, and I would say that's the biggest takeaway, is how do you meet consumers where they are in mobile? And I could talk to you for days if you want about that. Before you go ahead and call Courtney and make sure that you line something up or some sort of consultation. I guess the final question would be, now that you're getting started, somebody watches this. Yeah. There's certain people that should be contacting you, and how do they contact you?
Sure. Anybody that wants to change the world, I'm available for. And, it is, with these tech companies, it's anywhere from, positioning yourself correctly. I spent a couple hours yesterday with a firm that really wanted to pitch well to banks and servicers. And we spent hours pacing around the room talking about, who are you and how do we get there? To real use case development, real product use case development in, I have this cool widget, it does this. Is there a use case for servicing? I'm happy to tell you no. I'm good at saying, I'm happy to tell you no if there isn't one. But 9 times out of 10, it is, this is the potential path to here. Consigliera is the name. It's like the boy trusted advisor from the mafia, but we use an A because we celebrate women. So www.consigliera.com or Courtney@consigliera.com. You can get a hold of me there or on LinkedIn. And I'm happy to set up time and see what type of magic we can make.
Yeah, definitely do that, and definitely reach out to Courtney, and definitely never give up. I'm somebody that has applied to 5 mass challenges. We finally got in. We were a top 20 finalist, but I'd say for years people said, stop. What are you doing trying? I've applied to Flagstars twice, but I will keep applying. Applied to the ICBA's accelerator. I think accelerators are the fastest way to get where you want to go.
Amen.
Outside of getting a co-founder that knows how to raise Series A real quick. No questions asked, but otherwise, and sometimes you need a little bit of confidence, and you need a lot of focus. And so I think Courtney can really help you in both areas there. So thank you, Courtney. Appreciate you coming on. We would love to have you back in the future. And thank you again.
Thank you. This has been great.